Hello and welcome to day 129 of Dungeon 23, the series we make a room of a mega dungeon every day for a year. This room is going to be kind of like, well, not the mess hall, but like the chef's quarters, I guess. And he is a zombie. He is basically a regular zombie, although he obviously has more HP. And I think I gave him higher AC of 10 instead of 8, who is a bit tougher to deal with, but also he has multi-attack and two special attacks he does. So the first thing he could do is obviously his multi-attack, which is he could either make two of his cleaver attacks or one of his cleaver attacks and then also one of his bite attacks. Now, the first attack he has is his bite attack. It's a +3 to hit, 5-foot range, or reach rather, and it does 1d6 plus 1 piercing damage, which is the same as its normal slam attack, but piercing instead of bludgeoning. And in addition to that, the zombie chef regains a number of hit points equal to the hit points the target lost. Only if they're humanoid, though. And that's basically the zombie kind of eating the person alive. Pretty gruesome, but also he's like a giant chef zombie guy. So, well, actually not really giant. I imagine him being bigger and bulkier. Like maybe he was an orc previously before he was undead. I don't know. But the important thing is that he's just really gross, violent zombie chef. And he's basically eating the people alive. And he is going to attack the party because unlike the other skeletons here, which was programmed by the wizard to just fight this endless conflict for his amusement, the zombie is hungry, so he's going to attack the party, hence why he bites them. Another thing he has is his cleaver attack, which is +5 to hit. He could hit this more frequently, which is probably why he's going to use it more often. And it actually does more damage because it again does 1d6 plus 1 damage, although this is slashing instead of bludgeoning or piercing. And the target must make a DC 11 con save or take an additional 1d4 damage at the end of its next turn. And that's basically to mechanicalize, I suppose is the right word, mechanize, the idea of it's a giant rusty cleaver and you're bleeding now, like you're bleeding out. But it's only for the one round. And I didn't really give it a damage type because would that be slashing damage because you're bleeding out? Or maybe necrotic because your body dying, losing oxygen and nutrients, so it's being drawn away from. So is that necrotic? Not really poison because it's not that you're getting tetanus, it's that you're getting blood loss. Even then, poison is always used like a disease damage, even though poison and disease are really two separate things. Although that's like septic, so kind of. I don't know, it's as weird as vampires taking acid damage from water. Like, yeah, I get that's a thing in the lore, but why is it acid damage and not like some kind of other damage? I don't know. Anyway, those are the two attacks the guys can make, and he can make 2 per turn, so he's going to be a bit more of a challenge for the 4th level party. Actually, this is level 5, so 5th level party. Well, around 5th level party. They could be a level lower or higher. It's a bit shaky. You just want to go for the feel of what level's appropriate. But that's really the only thing this room has for combat. What it also has is 2 chests of supplies. Now, this one is pretty basic. It's an unlocked chest. If it doesn't have a DC explicitly given for it, I'm just going to assume it's unlocked. I did specify that things were unlocked, but that's more just description on my part. But it's always good to assume things are unlocked unless stated otherwise. And this chest is completely filled with 3d4 plus 3. Basically, like that. If they actually want to keep these things, it's a good number to have, so you give them like an actual resource, even though it's basically useless. It's the whole bunch of sealed wax paper bags labeled skeleton rations, because this is the skeleton's food. They eat food, apparently. And each bag contains 2 chickens worth of chicken bones. Because they're skeletons, they eat skeletons. Instead of eating chicken, they're eating chicken bones. It's funny. It's really just trash and a bit of a gag. Although there actually is treasure in this chest as with the other one, which is basically the same gimmick of it's trash, but there's actually something useful in there. With a DC 12 investigation check, or simply by just spilling out all the contents of the chest and looking through it, a bottle of bone pills can be found at the bottom. The bottle contains 1d4 plus 1 of these bone pills, and when a creature takes one for 1 hour, they are resistant to bludgeoning damage for 1 hour. Man, that's redundant. I didn't realize that, but it's funny, so I'll keep it there. Basically, it's like a calcium pill, whatever. You take it, and it makes your bones super strong, but it also makes them bigger so you're a little bulky. It also means you lose the ability to swim for that hour because your weight increases because your bones are getting bigger and stronger and heavier, obviously. And also your speed decreases by 5. So it's a good way to maybe bulk up the wizard or rogue just before like some kind of battle. You're fighting some guys, you can do a lot of bludgeoning damage. And hopefully you don't go to anywhere where there's a lot of water. I should actually specify non-magical bludgeoning damage. I think I'll specify that. Just put that down here to non-magical. Because that's a bit too overpowered. Because that's something that barbarians get as a class feature. I mean, sure, there's no major drawbacks. Although rage is it's a spent resource, but it's still really good that they have blanket bludgeoning immunity instead of just specifically magical, non-magical, I should say, bludgeoning immunity. But anyway, that's what this guy does. Pretty basic and simple, pretty funny. Because it's like bone pills. Like, what is even that? This guy's a bit funny too because same basic thing, 3d4 plus 3 of the thing, but it's glass bottles containing a mysterious white liquid labeled as bone juice. It's all kept up in shredded paper to, prevent the bottles from breaking. Kind of like how when you ship things in shredded newspaper. And a DC 9 nature check is needed to basically identify it as milk. It's mundane cow's milk. It's not magical anyway. Although it is somehow fresh, even though it's in like the 5th floor of a dungeon that's also a battlefield somehow. So it's, again, going into the idea that maybe the wizard is purposely leaving food and resources down here to keep the party here for whatever reason. Again, probably for his own entertainment, because the wizard's a crazy old guy. Wizards are crazy, they have a lot of power, a lot of time on their hands, and they're bored, so they mess with people. Now, the actual real treasure of this chest is that with a DC 14 Arcana check, or if you just, for whatever reason, take all of the shredded paper and kind of start assembling it and looking through it over the course of an hour, you could determine that some of the paper comes from a magical magazine. And that magazine pertains to magic, not that the magazine itself is magical, called Necromancer's Quarterly. If the party member, or the party in general, fully assembles this collection of shredded paper over the course of 8 hours. It does not have to be continuous or consecutive. It just, during your short rest, you have to sleep for at least 6 hours, and then the other 2 hours of the 8-hour minimum could be like light activities, like reading, keeping watch, and this could be under those 2 hours. So it's gonna take you about 4 long rests to assemble it. But that being said, long rests don't have to be 8 hours. They have to be a minimum of 8 hours. So you could get it done all in one go if the party sets up camp and says, okay, we're going to wait here for like an entire day, 16 hours or so, just to get this done. And you just fast forward, people take some rations. You don't have to go through monotony of describing things every so often. The important thing is that you assemble one page of this magazine completely. All the other bits are missing or damaged or whatever. However, that one page contains a special ritual pertaining to the Animate Dead and also Find Familiar spell. What that means is, knowing this ritual allows you to cast Animate Dead on a beast, which is really, really good, but it's only a CR0 beast, so it's not as good. So, an undead bear would be extremely overpowered, but you're only going to be able to do Animate Dead on things like chickens, and crows, cats, and spiders. So it's not nearly as unbalanced as one might think it is. It's more so just like a flavor thing. Because I think most DMs who aren't super pedantic and borderline litigious when it comes to rules lawyering will let Animate Dead be cast on like a creature. Maybe have it upcast. Well, I say creature, but I mean beast or non-humanoid. Maybe with upcast or with like a special ritual like this is, or some other weird artifact or magic item or downtime activity. The important thing is it's not super out there, and it's kept in check by the fact that the beast has to be CR0. Or, in addition to that, it also gets the skeleton or zombie racial modifier. Which, if you don't know, there's officially skeleton races and zombie races like designed for player creation, but they're not meant for players. They're meant to be used by DMs to make other monsters and characters undead. Kind of like how Dracolich isn't really like a dragon that's in the monster manual, or rather an undead, but it's not an actual creature. It is just a modifier. It's something you take and then paste onto another dragon so it becomes a Dracolich. That way you don't have to worry about having to make 3 stages of life, or 4 stages of life, I think, technically, because it's Wormling, Young, Adult, and Ancient. Yeah, so 4 stages of life for each color, and then also throw in a Dracolich for each stage of life, and then each color. It bogs it down. So having it be like a prefab schematic modifier is a lot easier, and that's what the skeleton and the zombie race are in the DMG. And they basically just give the creature the benefits and drawbacks of skeleton zombies. Zombies get undead fortitude and obviously unusual nature or undead nature, where they don't have to eat, sleep, or drink. But they also have like their dexterity, wisdom, intelligence, and charisma kneecapped, as with skeletons too. And of course the skeletons get the... It's actually funny because they just have vulnerability to bludgeoning damage in their character sheet for skeletons. The actual trait name is called Brittle Bones, but you never know that because you don't actually look at the DMG to see what that actual effect is called, for skeletons at least, because you never hear about it from the player's perspective, because players aren't supposed to have this. You could give it to them, but they're not really designed for players. It's not very balanced, and also because the DMG races have negative modifiers, which you do not see anymore. I wish they'd bring them back because it was interesting, it was fun to have creatures with really high stats in one thing and really low in another, but we're not going to get them anymore because of stupid reasons that I'm not going to get into. But just take those prefab modifiers found in the DMG and just slap them onto whatever beast you have. And they're probably going to have like 1 wisdom, 1 charisma, 1 intelligence, or whatever. But their strength may be bumped up a bit, and their dex or con will be bumped up depending on which one you take. And it still counts as being a thing you need to re-up control over. Granted, an undead spider, once you lose control of it, it's not going to be a big threat to you like a normal zombie is. But if you want to re-up it, you gotta actually spend the spell slots. It still counts as one of your expended uses of the 3rd level spell. And that's assuming that you even take Animate Dead. Which the wizard, which again, this entire project is kind of made with wizards in mind, because as I've said before, this dungeon is built with the idea of the party being made up of a fighter, a rogue, a cleric, and a wizard, because that's like the core 4 play styles represented. And they may take Animate Dead simply because they could get a lot of use out of all these skeletons they've been fighting. There's ample amount of bones. But if they don't take it, or if they're playing a necromancer and holding off on taking Animate Dead, which I have no idea why the Necromancer subclass for Wizard doesn't just say, at 6th level, you get Animate Dead, or if you already took it, then take a different one, because it basically means when you get your class's main spell, it's a level after the other spellcasters would get it. It's just kind of annoying how you have to wait longer to do your thing. Kind of like how bards could get paladin spells before paladins do, thanks to arcane secrets. But that's a whole different story. But yeah, if the party member, for whatever reason, doesn't have Animate Dead, which is, again, a pretty good reason to not have it, because it's a niche spell. Well, it's not niche, but it's playstyle specific. And that is if they have the Find Familiar spell, which most wizards will have. They could choose Undead as their familiar's creature type, because usually you could only choose Celestial, Fey, or Fiend as your creature type. Now, familiars have the stats of the beast that they are taking the form of when you look into the list of options for your familiar, but their creature type is a celestial, fiend, or fey. It's never a beast. And I think undead works for them because the idea of like you having a little like bird you reanimated, it seems like something necromancers would really want to do when they're first getting into the dark arts, you know? In fact, it's kind of weird how there's no way to reanimate beasts except for maybe like Finger of Death, but even that may just be for humanoids only. I think maybe Spore Druid could reanimate beasts, but it's weird. You'd think they'd be a lot easier to animate, kind of like how there's a guy in Skyrim who is some generic necromancer NPC, who's hostile, but instead of resurrecting a bunch of skeletons around him, which is annoying because the player could only resurrect one undead at a time, unless you have twin spell, or say screw that and just get some mods, which he should. Anyway, he just brings back a bunch of dead chickens, and that's hilarious. But you can't do that in D&D. Somehow Skyrim has something that Dungeons and Dragons doesn't, and that's weirdly upsetting to me. But that is the special ritual that can be found shredded. You have to pull a Danny DeVito penguin by gluing together an insane amount of shredded paper to get it to work. But it's fun little flavor, doesn't necessarily do a whole lot, isn't super helpful, but it's cool, and again ties into the theme of lots of undead in this dungeon. And yeah, that is basically our room. Just a really hungry zombie with a scary meat cleaver, a bunch of chicken bones, some vitamin supplements, lots of milk, and a novice necromancer ritual, which I was actually planning on doing more of them throughout the dungeon. I was going to do them earlier to kind of give us a bit of an homage to West of Loathing, which is one of my favorite games. It's not the best game ever. The best game ever is Portal 2, and I'm not going to elaborate on that now, because I said it before. Loathing, you have to like find books called Nex-Mex. Instead of Tex-Mex, it's necromancy, it's Nex-Mex instead of Tex. Anyway, you have to find these books that give you like special necromancer abilities, like the vampiric yodel, or the dark howdy, or just conjure skeleton. And I like the idea of like necromancers having to find their magic out in the world. I get why it has to be the way it is in D&D, because if your class doesn't come with it, you should just assume you're never gonna get it, because it's all DM dependent. But it fits much more that necromancy is this thing that behaves almost kind of like psionics in older editions, where you start off as one class, and you kind of spec into this other, not even subclass, but like a parasitic collection of special abilities with an overarching theme that slowly destroy your other class abilities and replace them with their own. So, I don't know. Maybe I might do like an OSR style video about how to make necromancy seem more involved, because it's really just like 4 spells that makes a necromancer. But anyway, this is our room. Thanks for watching and or listening if you made it this far. If you want to see more, consider liking, commenting, and subscribing, so that way these videos will show up in your recommendations more often. There's also notifications, but if you don't want to turn on notifications, you just come back tomorrow, because these videos come out daily. So yeah, I apologize for the poor quality. It's not going to get any better.